So both the Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 GPUs have leaked thanks to a popular GPU testing bank. Not only that, but I'm told by several sources that I trust that these are accurate, at least when it comes to GPU metrics. Let's get into it. What is going on, guys? Dealer here, back again with yet another video talking about GPU performance for the next generation consoles. And hey, if you read the title, you know that's exactly what it's about. And if you're tired of hearing about it, don't watch the video, or maybe go ask Microsoft to talk about some more new games. I can cover that. Until then, I'm going to cover what many ask me to cover, what I absolutely enjoy talking about, and you know what? We're going to have a good time doing it. Especially when I'm told by a few different sources that this is accurate when it comes to the GPU side of things. Very, very exciting information here, and it only confirms everything that you've heard here. Now, we got this information thanks to techpowerup.com, a GPU specs and banking site for all graphics processors. And when I'm told by a few sources that I really trust that it is legitimate or accurate on GPU metrics, at least for the Xbox, that's more than enough for me to go off of. Now, when it comes down to it, there is a pretty big performance disparity here, so I expect to see some triggered fanboys in the comments. But when it also comes down to it, we've been telling you forever that there will be a big performance disparity here, and you know what? All of the reliable sources out there, all of the accurate people out there have been telling you this forever now, and these numbers only seem to double down on all of that. Whether you want to believe it or not, PlayStation does not have the power edge this time around. Don't worry, you'll pay less money for that, and that's good for some, but if you're wanting the most performance possible in a console, well, you're going to really like what you see out of the Xbox Series X numbers here. But hey, let's start with the PS5 numbers. Again, only covering the PS5 numbers here because I was told the Xbox numbers are accurate on the GPU side, and this comes from the same source. So I am assuming, even though it doubles down on everything that's already leaked about this thing, that these numbers are accurate as well when it comes to raw compute. AMD PlayStation 5 GPU. Keep in mind the consoles use an APU, it's the CPU-GPU combination. The RAM is shared as well, that's why memory here is questionable, but that's also why I was told that the GPU metrics were the ones that were accurate for the Xbox. So let's start with the graphics processor. As I talked about in my last PlayStation 5 video, it is Navi 10. The architecture is RDNA 1.0. It is a 7nm process, as we've known. There is the amount of transistors on the chip. The die size is 251mm squared. Of course, as we know, the release date is 2020. And something that is really cool is they've actually got a log from the other information on their site, other GPUs, and apparently the PS5 has a benchmark out there. I suspect that this is the same benchmark that I reported on quite some time ago. When it comes to the raw numbers, apparently it rivals the Radeon 7. It is indeed faster than the 5700 XT and RTX 2070, with the RTX 2080 being about 13% faster, and the RTX 2080 Ti being about 33% faster on this benchmark. But does it matter? For what is most likely something like $399, this is going to be a ridiculous amount of performance in a console. You guys should be extremely happy with that. Now, to achieve that, it says it's using 36 compute units at 2000 megahertz, which is very, very impressive. This is a number that has popped up before. Where there's smoke, there's fire. And there's the infamous 9.2 teraflops figure when it comes to the full floating point performance. And if you wanted to do half floats, the Cerny method, you would have 18.43. Now we're going to move on to the Xbox Series X, but what's the takeaway for PS5? Well, it's a ton of power in a console, easily rivaling something like 5700 XT. This is simply one benchmark. Different applications, different games do prefer different architectures and different manufacturers, but expect this to be somewhere in the same ballpark. When it comes down to it, you can compare the T-flops from both the Xbox Series X and the PS5 because they are both running on the Navi architecture. Newer or older, they are both running on the Navi architecture. And the newer the architecture, the more performance gains per T-flop. That's actually why an older card like the Radeon 7 gets outperformed outperformed by some other cards with less T-flops today because AMD's newer Navi architecture is much more efficient at gaming per T-flop. That's why something like 5700 XT with around 9.5 T-flops can beat the 13 T-flops of older GCN architectures. But again, different benchmarks, different optimizations, etc. Keep this in mind. Now let's get into AMD's Xbox Series X GPU, an absolute beast. Keep in mind, I was told that the GPU metrics on this sheet are accurate. And if you watch this channel, you know that I don't just say that kind of stuff. Scarlett graphics processor. There is a lot of information here. Unfortunately, we do not have any kind of benchmarks to compare. But those of you that know math and whatnot should be able to get a rough idea. Let's start with the graphics processor. It says here that it is, of course, RDNA 2.0, as I just said the other day. Even though that information is always changing, people are scrambling to update their information. The last thing I was told was RDNA 2.0. As we know, 7nm process, and there is a big difference here between the transistor count of the two consoles. Not only that, but the actual die size. 350 millimeters squared on this thing, and there's a reason it is bigger. That can mean a few different things. For one, the actual physical size of the chip would not be that big if there were not more silicon there doing more work, which we'll get into in a second. That also could mean they have more ray tracing hardware on board. As I've covered in the past, my dream would be to have some kind of physics acceleration hardware on the chip as well, but hey, that's probably a long shot, just something I'd really like to see. Says here that it is 56 compute units running at 1700 megahertz, and if you've listened to one of my last few videos, you know that sounds familiar as well. Again, I was assured that the GPU section of this was accurate, but the memory maybe take with a grain of salt until we get a bit more clarification. After all, the consoles are APUs, they got shared memory, shared bandwidth. You were looking at more than 12 gigs here, you were looking at more like 16 for the total system and 13 for games. But it says here 672 gigabytes per second, which is absolutely insane. Now that's all cool, but what about the big number? The number we had talked about weeks ago, and then was the same day later confirmed by Windows Central, then Tom Moore, and then even Digital Foundry are agreeing on the 12 teraflops now. Well, it says 12.19 T-flops of raw compute, and if you want to do the Cerny method, that comes out to 24.37 of half float performance. Now, of course, we don't use those half floats for almost anything in modern AAA games, so we're really using the 12.19 T-flops now. That is the total output, that is the performance of the chip. Now, worst case scenario is that it's a dev kit, and maybe the dev kit has 12.19, but keep in mind that the Xbox One X dev kit was 6.4 teraflops, where the retail unit was 6. I think the very lowest you would see this at is 12 teraflops exactly. And I really want to come back to that RDNA 2.0. That is a big deal for the actual system itself, how they achieve the power here. Now, some will be silly enough to say this isn't a big deal, but it is an absolutely massive deal, the disparity between the Xbox Series X GPU and the PS5 GPU. There is a big difference here. Not only that, but this does not tell the whole story on ray tracing, which will most likely be better on the Series X as well. And if you know how to do math, as I said before, you can kind of round up that number over the PS5 GPU on that same benchmark. We know this thing is going to be substantially more powerful, well over the 2080 in that benchmark, somewhere up around the 2080 Ti in that benchmark. Again, I have to stress that different graphics processors prefer different benchmarks, different games, different architectures, different manufacturers, so this is not the end-all be-all, but there is going to be an absolutely massive disparity between the performance here, and if we're lucky, it'll only be $100 difference between the two consoles. But hey, if there's not, Microsoft always have that low-end Xbox that's coming out, the Lockhart, which should be around $300. And if you're worried about the older systems confusing people, don't be. They will phase those systems out in time. But again, if you got a problem with the things said on this video, remember that Digital Foundry also agree and are hearing that this thing will be around 12 T-flops. They are also agreeing that 9.2 is the likely target for the PS5 chip. And the thing that you should really note is that we've been saying that, but for longer. Just keep that in mind. There are a ton of great people in this community that know their stuff, and in time we will see how accurate these numbers are. But hey, let me know your thoughts down below. Share this with as many people as you can. We are slowly unraveling the mysteries of the next generation. If you have not checked out my videos before this discussing the SSD implementation and integration into the GPU and more, we have a ton of information on this channel about that stuff. And as always, to those that are worried about the speculation of it all, you should have to know by now that this This is not random things that I'm making up. Everything usually has a source, or I usually go off of reporting on something based off of a source I know behind the scenes. There is a reason for this kind of stuff. Let me know your thoughts down below. Hit that like button, share this with a buddy or two, subscribe if you haven't, hit that bell button for notifications. If you want to support what I do, support the channel, the information here, the videos here, consider hitting that join button next to the subscribe button, or hit that Patreon link down below. Shout out to everybody who supports that information and all of the listeners of RDX Podcast. Just so you know, we do plan on having Seamus Blackley on here soon, the creator of the Xbox himself. Stay tuned for more information on that, or follow me on Twitter where you'll likely find out more in the future. That is, of course, at dealer_gaming. Follow me on Xbox Live at ii_dealer_ii. And again, let me know your thoughts down below. I'm Dealer. I'm out.